Is free agency over for the Bucs, and is it time to officially turn everyone's attention to the draft? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at EKloskyWTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm the deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. And of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10TampaBay.com. And this show is here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I'd like to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can do that, become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to sign up today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started and just bet on UConn to win in the first round, and then you're going to have $200 right there in bonus bets. But Jason Licht is already talking about Mike Evans' next contract, and a former fan favorite Buccaneer sends a warning shot after joining his new team. That's coming up a little bit later. But first, let's talk about the draft, because Evan, a few episodes ago, I did a little bit of a roster reset where I took a look at who the Bucs brought back, who they brought in from the outside, took a look at the depth chart, figured out some holes that still need to be addressed. And, you know, while things have slowed down on the free agent front, kind of across the board, there's still a few big names left out there that I don't really think the Bucs were ever going to be in on to begin with. You have Mike Williams, who just signed his deal with the New York Jets to join Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson in that offense. You still have Justin Simmons out there. You still have, Ezekiel Elliott, who's bigger in name than he is in production at this point. But you still have a couple of impact free agents floating out there. But for the Buccaneers and their fans, is it officially draft season now?
I mean, I don't know when another move will be made, but the team needs a pass rusher. And I still don't think that the team is 100% out on making a move to acquire one. It's a little bit suspect that they've really covered all their bases, right? They got offensive line depth. They've got cornerback depth. But they have not dealt with wide receiver depth, which is okay anyway on the roster. And they have not dealt with the turnover on the defensive line, which right now is replacing Will Golston. You're replacing Shaq Barrett. And not saying that, Golston is one of these, he's not what he once was when he came into the league, right? I mean, he's, an older player. But still, they need a pass rusher. So I have a tough time believing they're not going to bring in somebody who can get after the quarterback, especially since they have plenty of ways to create wiggle room with their salary cap. So I don't know if we're fully on the draft side of things yet, but I also think that Jason Licht and company are working from a position of power. I think that they want to maybe allow the dust to settle, deals be made, and then, they can push this for as long as they want, kind of going up into training camp, of seeing who doesn't really have a job and then maybe acquire a key piece for a very, formidable price. But you can also remember that a deal can be made right before, during the draft, for one of the people they're talking about, and they might be holding off to see what's kind of available and see if they can get someone and maybe not have to address it. So we'll see. I'm not 100% sure one way or the other. I would start worrying about the draft right now, because as far as news coming from One Buck Plays, it should either be a Wirfs extension, an Antoine Winfield Jr. extension, or maybe this sneaky move to get an edge rusher. But we're pretty much at the tail end of what you would need to worry about, and I believe you should start turning to the draft in general, since we're about a month out from it.
Yeah, and we've talked on this show together a couple of times about the Bucs potentially trying to make a trade. And of course, you had the two guys in Philly, right? You had Josh Sweat and you had Hassan Reddick, who both seem to be available. Now, Josh Sweat has reworked his deal. He's going to stay with Philadelphia. But outside of maybe Hassan Reddick, is there anybody that you've kind of been keeping an eye on their situation, thinking that this might be a candidate for the Bucs to maybe move that 3rd round pick that they just got for Carlton Davis and try to bring in an established edge rusher?
Well, I don't know if they're going to use it for that. They might need that 3rd round pick to move up in
Sure.
first or the second to acquire a talent they're really high on. So there are a lot of things that they can do with that added selection. It would be interesting, if you're the Bucs and let's say you wanted Hassan Reddick. The Eagles, again, don't have any leg to stand on, because they can either run their roster with depth, or you're going to have to meet the price that the Buccaneers are asking for, or see if somebody else has a better price. So I don't know, hypothetically, if in this situation the Eagles would be holding out, or Jason Licht and company say, hey, this is the deal. We feel like it's fair. Come get back to us when we know you can't deal him. So I think there's a little bit of that going on, but who knows? I think it would be really haphazard. It would be a really big misstep to not acquire someone who can get off the to get after the quarterback, because it is the difference between this team being good and great, because Todd Bowles' defense relies on the pressure, and if he's got to blitz into oblivion again, we're just going to run into the same issues we've seen the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I know some Bucs fans were pounding the table for Chase Young, who went to the Saints. I talked about Chase Young on yesterday's episode, and that move probably isn't as impactful as people want to make it out to be. But as far as the open market, you're right. There really isn't, a guy that's out there right now that's going to come in and all of a sudden be, kind of the anchor of the pass rush for the Buccaneers. And they are relying heavily on the draft, unless they do make a move, which I really don't foresee. Or maybe they're banking on going into the draft thinking, you know what, Yaya got 7.5 sacks with less than 50% of defensive snaps. He's going to be, a guy. But, you and I have discussed numerous times on this show about how that is the number one need for the Bucs going into the draft, is that edge rush.
And I love Yaya. Don't get me wrong. I'm really excited to see him in year 2. But of those 7.5 sacks, I think 3 of them were cupcakes. Like the 2 sacks he had in San Francisco, I believe, were just like handed right to him. I believe he had another one where it was just like guy fell on the ground and just tap him. So, or he was left unblocked and it was just like a straight shot because something got screwed. So there's a little bit of context that's needed there. Again, he is a freakazoid of an athlete. And I think Todd Bowles called him Optimus Prime. That's who he is. But you need more than that. I'm okay with the guys they have on the edge to handle the run. And those guys are important too. But as much as I love pressures, and they are important and people don't talk enough about them, you still need the sacks. So I don't want to overemphasize sacks because it's not as important as I think the general public makes it out to be, but I don't want to also minimize sacks because they are game-changing plays and for the most part are going to halt drives and force you to punt.
Yep, absolutely no question about it. But meanwhile, there is something else on Jason Licht's mind, and that is another deal for Mike Evans. That's coming up next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, brake kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view of the day. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. You can also catch Evan on occasion over there on Locked On Rays. So check out those guys. My dad I think he listens to Locked On Rays more than he listens to this show because he talks to me all the time. He doesn't care what I think about the Buccaneers.
It has mostly to do with the fact that he does not love you.
That could also be it. But somebody that everyone loves is Mike Evans, who has already restructured his deal that he signed a few weeks ago. And of course, that was more paperworky stuff than actual restructuring. There was a report out there that it freed up like $17 million in cap space, but in actuality, it was just changing the structure of things and what had already been accounted for. Anyway, regardless, GM Jason Licht already has his sights set on Evans' next deal. So the NFL report on NFL Network, Jason Licht was a guest on there, and he was asked about Evans, and he said, quote, he had one of his best years. And of course, we look at all the GPS and all those things, and this was one of the fastest years that he's had. It's a tribute to his training. He's working extremely hard as he's gotten up there in age. And as he's put years in and logged years in, he's worked harder and harder in the offseason. So we weren't afraid of losing any. We weren't afraid of him losing anything. In fact, we think that he's still in his prime, very much so. And I wouldn't be surprised if we actually sign him to another contract extension after this one's done, the way he's motivated right now, end quote. Now, I can't imagine that they let things get to the point that they did this year, especially if Evans goes out and gets 1,000 yards again next season, and that Evans' next deal will be an extension before the 2025 season. But Evan, the $1 million question is, how much longer do you think Evans is going to keep playing and keeping up this level of production that he's gotten so consistently?
I don't know. He said that he would like to at least go 3 to 4 more years. It is really difficult to understand because Look, I mean, Aaron Donald still has so much left in the tank, right? But he just, he's over it. Does Mike Evans want to keep playing? Will he hit a point where maybe he doesn't get to 1,000 and says, you know what, I'm out? Or maybe he gets, back to back 1,000 yards and doing this 1 year contract thing and says, you know what, I'm good. I think max 4 years for Mike Evans. And I think a large part of that will come down to where the Buccaneers are. Does he want to continue training year round? And does he feel like he needs more on his resume to, help out his Hall of Fame case, which I think this year was really the first year that I felt good that people were finally on board, that this man is a Hall of Famer. I feel like for a long time, fans, pundits were, the ones that at least, if we're screaming out Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. And it felt like that was finally being accepted this year. So there's a lot of variables. He's been healthy his entire career for the most part, outside of his annual, I got a hamstring issue in spring training camp. So I think working with Tom Brady has helped him a lot with achieving some longevity and changing his diet and the way that he believes that he can continue success into his older years. Will he be pumping out 1,000 yards at 37 years old? I have a tough time believing it. But for right now, I think 4 years is probably a safe call. And he signs his 2, and then really he goes on the Rondé Barber, Levante David, let's just sign you up for a year and see how it goes plan. And if he made the move to stay in Tampa this time around, I have a tough time believing that he's going to want to leave the next time around when he's even more established. His kids are even more, are even older. So that's just kind of where I know that it's a good tagline. Mike is a Buck for life, and technically he's not a Buck for life. He's, it's only 2 more years. He probably will still have plenty in the tank, but that's why I think A, with selling tickets, but B, why that's been pushed across is because at that point in his career, I just feel like if you were going to commit to the team now, you're probably going to commit to it again in the future.
Well, and for those that don't remember, the 2014 wide receiver draft class was heralded as one of the best. And of course, it seems like every year it's like this is the best this class that we've had in, so and so years or whatever. And it seems like every year's quarterback class is the greatest thing that we've ever seen in the history of the NFL. But that's, the hype of the draft. But I want to go back and I want to point out some of these wide receivers, considering what Mike Evans has done and is still doing compared to some of these other guys that were in the draft class. It's wild. You had Sammy Watkins. I have no idea where Sammy Watkins even is at this point. Odell Beckham Jr., who is, he was the guy. Everybody loved Odell Beckham.
He had a lot of injuries too.
He made one catch that made him like a superstar, but
little bit overrated. Lots of injuries, But I think pure talent was pretty darn good at his peak.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, dude was on pace to be Super Bowl MVP until he got hurt. In that Rams-Bengals Super Bowl that was 56. You have Marquise Lee. No idea where he is.
That's nice.
Brandon Cooks, Jordan Matthews, again, Kelvin Benjamin. That was a person that existed.
Yeah, feast mode.
Feast mode. Jarvis Landry, he's still around. He's still kicking. Devontae Adams, obviously, on track to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver.
Yeah, him and Mike are running side by side, really.
They really are. And you have Allen Robinson. He's still around, but, he's not Mike Evans. He's not Devontae Adams. And then, guys like Dante Moncrief, Cody Latimer, Martavis Bryant, Josh Huff. So you take a look at some of these guys and kind of the ebbs and flows of who the hotness was, with like Odell Beckham Jr. and Kelvin Benjamin there for a New York minute. You had a guy like Devontae Adams who really didn't even see the field until his second year, who has gone off and is he and Mike Evans, like you said, are neck and neck. And you have a couple of guys that are still contributing. They're not superstars like, Allen Robinson and Jarvis Landry, but they're still around. But you take a look at that class and you think of all the things that Mike Evans has done compared to others in his draft class, and it's wild to think about.
I mean, it's truly impressive what he's done, and it doesn't matter who you put him up against his draft class or wide receivers who have been in this league forever or in Canton. His numbers, his accomplishments, he's got that ring, all of it puts him into the upper echelon of guys who have ever suited up in the sport. And to do it all with one team, I don't care what sport it is, to be a Hall of Fame caliber player for one team your entire career, that is an enormous accomplishment and something that adds to really the essence of who Mike is when it comes to the loyalty and the trust that he has, not just with the people on the field, within the locker room, but also the community and the people of Tampa Bay.
Yeah, well, somebody else that the community of Tampa Bay absolutely loved has sent out a little warning shot after joining his new team. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, futures. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Right now, UConn is the favorite to win it all at plus 480, with Houston at plus 650, Purdue at plus 700, and Tennessee with the fourth highest odds at plus 1,000. The Gators are plus 6,500. Florida Atlantic is plus 13,000, and USF is a whopping plus 30,000. So a $5 bet on USF to win it all could win you a cool $1,500 if you believe the Bulls are going to shock the world. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs. And Evan, obviously fans were disappointed, but understood when Shaq Barrett was released. Even Shaq kind of knew it was coming when he was speaking with us after the loss in Detroit. However, the franchise's single-season record holder for sacks did not shy away from sending out a little warning after joining the Miami Dolphins. So at his introductory press conference, Barrett said he has, quote, a lot to prove, especially getting cut from another team like that adds another whole fuel to the fire right there. And I'm like, Dolphins going to be happy they signed me. Tampa going to be mad they let me go. End quote. Evan, this one's pretty simple. Are the Bucs going to be mad that they let Shaq Barrett go?
No, and I don't think anyone's mad that he said that either. Right? I think that's a fine statement. I hope he does. I think we're all rooting for Shaq. I don't see it as any shade. I see it as confidence and someone who's got a fire under his tush because he was fired. I mean, he was fired. That's what it comes down to. He was pretty much told, You're not good enough to make this sum of money, and we're not going to pay you it. So there's that. I have a really difficult time assuming that Shaq, though another year removed from his Achilles injury, at his age is going to have one of these renaissance seasons to pump out double-digit sacks. I think Shaq is still a very good player within his role. I think he's excellent in run defense and setting edges. I think he is heady. I think he knows what to do. He's not going to make many mistakes on the field. For the Buccaneers, they needed somebody to get after the quarterback, and that was Shaq's job. He was not getting sacks, and that's just a fact. I don't know what his job is going to be with the Dolphins, but the Dolphins might not need him to get sacks all the time. They might need him to set the edge. They might need him to do a little bit more of the dirty work that maybe an Anthony Nelson does for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who doesn't light you up with sack numbers either, but does a lot of the grunt work that we like seeing and sometimes splashes, So love Shaq, have no problems with the comments. I'm rooting for him. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did the right move, and I do not believe they're going to regret that decision. He's going to have one heck of a year to perform for what his contract was going to be if he stayed in Tampa Bay. And remember, what the Dolphins are paying him to be in Miami is not what the Buccaneers needed to pay him to stay in Tampa Bay. So there's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, and I don't think he holds any ill will towards the Buccaneers. And I don't think Bucs fans
not at all
should hold any ill will towards him. And I think you're 100% right. This is there's nothing wrong with the statement that he made. This is a guy saying, that he has a new level of motivation now. And it probably hurt on both a professional and a personal level that he was let go from the Buccaneers. And you know what? I hope he balls out in Miami. It's not like he would be balling out in New Orleans or Atlanta. And how much fun is he going to have playing for a head coach like Mike McDaniel, who might be just the coolest dude in the league to begin with? So, yeah, I mean, I hope Shaq has a bounce back year and he's able to get 10 or 11 sacks. And, it would stink if he does that and the Bucs don't get a edge rusher or the edge rusher that they need. But, Shaq Barrett, without him, Bucs don't win a Super Bowl, and he holds the franchise record, and he was great in the community. So, obviously wishing him nothing but the best. But Evan, before we get out of here, something fun begins on Thursday, and that is the University of Illinois' run to national championship status begins in Omaha, which no one lent me their private jet for my dad and I to be able to go to that game. So I'm a little disappointed in my Twitter followers.
You can book it right now. Illinois won't make it to the second weekend because they never do. So
I had to really talk myself into getting them into the Sweet 16 because, Underwood is the new Bob Huggins and can't get out of the second round. And if he doesn't do it this year with that team, then we're going to be having a very different discussion. Not you and I, but
Locked On Illinois. Their defense has been garbage the past month. Worries me a lot. Even though they won the Big Ten championship, it was not because of defense. So Terrence Shannon Jr., stud, love him. But you're going to have to score a bowl, just like Bama. I love Bama too, but to a certain extent, I just don't think teams like Bama, like Illinois, have the ability to make a long run because one of those games, the offense is not going to be clicking the way that you want it to click, and you do not have defense to fall back on, and you're gonna be playing a game from behind, and you're gonna be chasing it, and it's gonna be the struggle bus. So I tend to say Sweet 16 sounds about right. I think Illinois. I think their peak would be an Elite Eight. I think if you can get to the Elite Eight, that is you've really outdone yourself, in my opinion. At Final Four, as I always say, run the boat parade.
Yeah, and I would take an Elite Eight appearance, but I brought this up not to talk strictly about the Fighting Illini of the University of Illinois. But I was curious who you think, because everyone's picking UConn. Everyone is picking UConn. Are you part of that group, or are you going not so chalk and going with someone else to win the national championship?
In my heart of hearts, I do believe UConn becomes our first repeat winner since Florida in 06-07. Having said that, we have not had a repeat winner since then, but the Kansas City Chiefs have already proven to us that a repeat winner can happen. There's part of me that thinks the storyline is going to happen where we got repeat winner, same year. And I think that the worlds are going to collide that way. But typically, since that Florida championship, teams who have won the year previously, have not advanced better than the Sweet 16. So who do I look at that can really fluster UConn? Auburn. Auburn doesn't necessarily have the star power, but they have 1 through 8, in my opinion, the best lineup in the NCAA. And they're probably going to get bounced by Yale because I'm saying this. But I think Auburn and Bruce Pearl, that is a team. Bruce Pearl made it to the Final Four a few years ago, and they were like one questionable call away from going to the final that year. He understands how to get that far. He's got a group that I think is a little bit slept on nationally, even though they just won the SEC title. I think that Auburn, in that region of death, that you have UConn and Illinois and Iowa State and Auburn, I think Auburn can get it done. And if they can beat UConn, I think Auburn can win it all. So heart of hearts, I think UConn's got it. If you want to take a step outside the box a little bit, Auburn is a team that maybe you can ride and can be your bracket winner.
It's funny you say that because my wife filled out a bracket on Tuesday, and she has Auburn winning it all. And I just kind of looked at her. She's like, what? It can happen.
It can happen.
All right.
It can happen.
Yeah, she just wasn't going to pick Wisconsin because she said during the Big Ten tournament that their jerseys made them look like Little Orphan Annie because they had the white collar that stopped with the red right here. So it looked like the Little Orphan Annie bow. She's like, yeah, they can't win. It's impossible.
Yeah.
But with that, we are going to bid you all a fair adieu. Had to get a little March Madness talk in there because by the time Evan and I talk again, it's going to be the Sweet 16 already.
And my bracket will be burned to the ground.
Absolutely. I still have to do my upset bracket. And then somebody on Twitter put out every coach's favorite musical artist. So I'm going to do a bracket based off of their musical choices going head to head. Spoiler alert, University of Dayton getting bounced in round 1. But in the meantime, please check out everything that's going on over at BucsNation.com and on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10TampaBay.com. Follow along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eCloskey WTSP. Become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.